Today we are going to attempt to answer the age-old internet question, does the color of your guitar change its tone? Check it out. Hey, you're watching Alamo Music TV. My name is Chris McKee.
And I'm Cooper Greenberg.
We're here with Alamo Music Center in San Antonio, Texas. You can find us online at alamomusic.com. If you're new to the channel, please make sure to subscribe, turn on notifications, and like our videos. If you'd like to support the channel, make sure to visit our Teespring store linked below for our custom-designed t-shirts like the retro design that I'm wearing today. So it is a, believe it or not, very searched question on the internet. Does the color of your guitar change the sound or the tone of the instrument? And believe it or not, there's actually a lot of people who have asked this question, and including famous people who have opinions on this. Do you know perhaps who I might be referring to?
I do not.
So is it Billy Corgan, Smashing Pumpkins?
Yeah.
He was, I think, the first one that I saw in an article where he really kind of espoused this theory that, guitar color correlated with the sound of the guitar, and he experienced that within his own guitars. And I'm not actually here to disparage this idea at all, but really to investigate, is this the fact and why it might be the case? So, before I get into it, Cooper, what do you think?
No.
No, just flat out.
I think
End
it's
of
a
video.
flat out no. But I think there's a case to be made about how the aesthetic of a guitar can maybe contribute to a vibe.
How it turns
that you're
you on?
going for. Exactly, yeah. So I have two Stratocasters, not just here right now, but I do have two, I think they're maybe 2012 American Standard Strats, exact same maple neck. One is Olympic white, one is 3-color sunburst, and they sound exactly the same, I think. But I will choose which one based on the type of gig that I'm going to be playing, or
You accessorize based upon what you're wearing?
I think, yeah. And so maybe it doesn't, yes, it does not change the actual sound to my ears, but it changes the vibe, which contributes to the sound a whole lot. That's what I think. What do you think?
Well, that's interesting because I do think it plays a role. We've talked about this kind of before. When you're initially attracted to a guitar, it's usually based upon the aesthetics of the instrument that draws you in. And then, everything kind of goes from there. But you kind of walk up and pick up a guitar at a shop initially because you think it looks cool, right? Or maybe you do because it looks ridiculous and you're like, what is this thing,
Yeah.
So I believe that certainly plays a role. And if typically you purchase an instrument that you think is good looking, that's attractive. You don't usually buy a guitar that you think is ugly. And so I do certainly think that plays a role. And so, what we perceive with our eye, I mean, we can get into big philosophical and psychological debate about what we perceive as beauty and how that translates and affects us, from what we're hearing to what we're experiencing while we're playing. I think that definitely plays a role. But in addition to that, I'm going to say maybe. Maybe color does change the sound of the guitar, but I don't really think it's as simple as saying a red guitar sounds hotter than a black guitar, or a blue guitar sounds more bluey. Maybe you should play blues on a blue guitar. Black guitars don't have a darker sound than white guitars, or any kind of thing like that. When it comes to electric guitars, and we're looking at just color, I think the better question is, does finish affect the sound of a guitar? And here's two examples that we've got, right? So I'm going to maybe try to dig in from a detective standpoint and figure out why this question ever came up.
Yeah.
So, we've got one theory. It's based upon aesthetics, right? It's based upon notion. We've got two guitars here. These are both brand new Fender Ultra Stratocasters. They have the exact same pickups. They have the exact same neck. They have the exact same fretboards. They have very different finishes. And actually, they have different body woods that are being utilized. Now, this finish is a discontinued plasma burst
red,
finish over an ash body. This finish is no longer available because they're not doing ash bodies. That's kind of a whole nother conversation. But a lot of people think that ash really affects the tone versus alder, which is what should be used on that body. And so this is, obviously a transparent finish as far as the color is concerned, and then you've got your clear coat on top. The color you have is
the polar white.
The polar white, which is sparkly.
Yeah, the impossible to see online, so see it in person, how cool it is, sparkly, kind of iridescent polar white. And, color, talking about it, this is a tortoiseshell pick guard. Probably sounds a little cooler.
It sounds more turtley.
It sounds like you're in a Turtles cover band.
Great. I love it. And this one just sounds very bland.
Yeah.
Very white. No.
Yeah, it's very white, yeah.
No, so I don't think the pick guard really matters unless the material changes. Yeah. But here's the thing, guitars are effectively physics instruments, right? What we're hearing is a combination of a whole bunch of things. So we're hearing the hardware, we're hearing the materials used for the body and for the neck, we're hearing the materials used for the saddle and for the nut, more so the saddle when you're fretting than the nut. You ever think about that? Like, you can talk about how nut material is important from like a tuning standpoint, and even the effect that it has on the sound, like a bone nut versus a plastic nut versus a metal nut. But once you fret, you're no longer hearing the nut. You're hearing the fret and the saddles, you know, along with the strings. And then, of course, on an electric guitar, it's the pickups, which are effectively microphones. And they're picking up whatever the sound is happening through the guitar. So you have this amalgam of things affecting everything from the harmonies to the sustain, and then on the pickups, the amount that it's like singing into an SM57 or 58 versus, some other microphone, right? Yeah. It's like going from a condenser to a ribbon mic and whatnot. It's going to affect the sound. I think all of those things are much more important than the color.
Yeah.
On an electric guitar specifically.
Yeah.
But here's where some of this, at least historically, I think might get interesting. I said that presumably that's alder, right? Presumably that's alder. And I know that that's alder because the Fender specifications tell me that color comes with an alder body. But what if something happened in the factory? What if it's ash?
You would never know.
Right. You would never know because it's a solid color. And here's the thing about this from a historical standpoint. We know that there were all sorts of different bodies utilized throughout the years that were not alder or ash. In fact, Leo Fender picked those because they were readily available. But he also experimented with pine, he experimented with mahogany, he experimented with, is it Eric Johnson's guitar? It was Sassafras or something?
Maybe.
And they did the reissue recently. And so depending upon what's under the paint could have an impact, or it will have an impact on the sound. Now, the amount of the impact, the level to which you're going to hear that difference is debatable.
Yeah.
Someone like Eric Johnson, he probably hears the difference. I don't know if I would. I know I have preferences on guitars, and like you said, maybe I like my ash-bodied Telly with a maple neck because it's just a black guard Telly.
Yeah.
And so I think the sound goes along with it. But I think that is something to maybe behind this conspiracy theory. I mean, imagine Billy Corgan, for instance, has a vintage Strat that's red, for sake of argument. And so this sounds better than any other guitar he's picked up. And he's correlated it to this color. But what if underneath the mahogany, it's a mahogany body? Because we know that happened.
Yeah.
We know there were guitars that came out of the Fender factory that were those woods. We know that there were oversprays on stuff, right? Yeah. So an ash body may have had a sunburst and then it got something else on it, So that could be part of it. But then that brings me up to my other point. That's got flake in it, right?
Yes.
This one doesn't. Now, you do some woodworking.
I
do some finish work on that woodworking.
Yeah.
You understand probably better than a lot of people how, applying finish can affect the eventual outcome of your finished product. If you're putting on something that's a clear coat, that's, say, for instance, satin, you're not having to build it up because you're not having to polish it to a high gloss.
Yeah.
If you're going to something that's a high gloss, you're having to put more layers of finish on it. If you're introducing color into that finish, it's going to be thicker still.
Yeah.
If you're introducing color that has flake in it, it's going to be thicker still.
Yeah.
Right? And now nobody's going to buy that guitar because I just said that. No, please. I think modern finishes, have really kind of pushed through, but I do think that they're in the smallest possible amount, this guitar presumably may have a thinner finish than that guitar.
That makes sense.
Right?
That's a logical assumption for sure.
I don't know that this is as important on electric guitars as acoustic guitars, but there's so many debates out there like between poly finish and nitro finish. Nitro always curing and sinking into the wood and overall being thinner, and so the guitar is more resonant because resonance is vibrations, and that's what we're talking about ultimately, right? Acoustic guitars, we know for a fact, are greatly affected by the finish on them. So if you purchase let's say a guitar made overseas that's more affordable, typically it's got a thicker sprayed on polyurethane coat, and it's going to affect it. It's like putting a blanket on the wood, right? If you move up, those glossy finishes become thinner. Satin finishes are typically thinner, and all of this stuff it has an effect. The degree to which that effect happens is, I think, debatable. What do you think, though? These are my theories.
Well, yeah, it's interesting that you bring that up with acoustics. I think we talked about the exotic Acoustasonic Strats the other day, and we could see the wood grain.
Yeah.
Like we could see the indentations of the actual grain itself. On something like this, you see the grain, but you're not going to feel.
You're not going to feel it.
You're not going to feel it.
And imagine, to that point, on these exotic Acoustasonics, right? If they were to do a gloss on it, you'd have to come in with a filler.
Yeah.
You'd have to level it all out. Then you'd have to come in with your finish, and you'd have to sand it and spray it and sand it and spray it and get it to a level where you can buff it. Because if you don't understand how manufacturing works when it comes to finishes, you can easily burn through a finish, and you have to have a certain level of thickness there.
Yeah.
One of the big changes that Taylor made years ago when they were doing their kind of advanced performance bracing and changes on their guitars was getting the finishes down to like 3 mils, which is that's like thinner than notebook paper. It's really, really thin. To do that in a glossy finish is extremely difficult. And the reason to do it was not to make the guitar more resilient to dings. It actually made it more susceptible to stuff like that. But the end game is to make the guitar sound better.
Yeah.
And so if you can make a finish thinner, glossy or not, it's going to sound better on an acoustic instrument particularly, and the acoustical properties that these guitars have benefit from it as well.
Yeah, and I think with the popularity on electrics, like relicking, and a lot of people say, I'll do that myself over the years. A lot of people prefer that. They don't want to get a factory relicked instrument. But in order to be able to do that on your guitar, you're going to want a finish that's not,
Super
extremely thick, because you're never going to wear through a very thick.
If you don't understand what Cooper's talking about right now, go look. You could probably do a Google search for like homemade, self-done relic jobs, and you can always spot when someone is like trying to sand through really thick, like Asian guitar gloss finish, and it's like this thick candy coat. That's on those guitars, and it's pretty comical to see how you have to like dig in there to try to make these.
What you're talking about with overspraying too, like you can see in a lot of the Fender custom shop stuff, people, when they were only available to get 3-tone sunburst and black Strats or whatever, but they wanted to send them back in, get Sonic Blue, get Shell Pink, and then they would just overspray a 3-tone sunburst Strat, and then over the years, right here, you start to see, and they're beautifully done, but it's so hard to get that on, something that's a homemade, I'm going to spray this in my homemade booth with Shell Pink. It's not going to work. But I do think the thinner the finish, generally people would go for a thinner, more resonant, something that's going to seal the guitar and not be, horrible and let water and everything in. But, it's desirable to have something that's going to be thin, that you can wear in over time, that you'll be able to see it, but also just let the wood breathe and age. And I would say that even though, I don't love plasma red, especially as compared to this white, that does make a little bit of a difference to me, that presumably might age,
be. It might, I don't know that this will age too much, because both of these are polyurethane guitars, but I do think that these finishes, I don't know this as gospel from Fender, but I'm pretty sure that the finishes on the guitars in the US factory are thinner than the guitars that come out of Mexico. I know they're thinner than a lot of the Japanese ones, because we've had some of the kind of foil design covered guitars. We had one that got damaged, and it, the finish on it literally looked like, like a chunk of candy. Like you bite into a candy apple, it was like that thick. And so, surely that has an impact in the grand scheme of things. I think at the end of the day, if you like the guitar, you'd like the guitar. If it sounds great, it sounds great. But to, deal with this question of, does color matter? Yeah, I think it could potentially, but only in the context of the finish
Yeah.
utilized to get there?
I think, I said at the very top of the video, no, it doesn't matter. However, let's say you're on alamomusic.com, you're looking at electric guitars, and you have all these categories that you can filter things out by. I probably regrettably choose the color first and then see all the strats that are in Olympic white before I check I want a rosewood fretboard, before I want noiseless pickups or whatever. So I think it does play a huge part, especially, for everybody.
So what you're telling us is you're shallow.
I'm extremely shallow. I hate everything that's not exactly tailor-made to my style. But truly, I would never buy a guitar that I didn't love the aesthetics of.
I agree. And
it changes how you feel and how you're playing and the vibe that you're trying to put forth.
Absolutely. So here's a question. I think we should, for the sake of argument here, put these two to the test. We'll have you play them. And I think these are going to sound a little bit different. Oh, and we should say this too, because we talked a little bit about pickups, right? Let's just finish with this. Every guitar will probably sound a little bit different, because if you understand pickup design for electric guitars, which are basically magnetic, you've got magnets and bobbins and wire, it's an imprecise science, particularly when it's a hand-wound pickup. So there's going to be changes, imperfections, and nuanced differences, period. No matter how precise manufacturing is getting. That was one of the big reasons for Fishman doing their Fluence pickups, which is basically like stacked circuit boards, it was more consistent. I don't know if that's a good or bad thing. I think sometimes the magic's found in certain guitars because of the happy accidents, being overwound, underwound, or whatever. But that certainly plays a role. So, we can play these two guitars. They have different body woods, and even though the pickups are the exact same model and the exact same model of guitar, there's probably potentially slight differences. Whether you can hear them over YouTube, let's find out. You ready?
Ready.
Put them to the test. Well, so could you hear the differences or not? I mean, through compressed audio over the internet, who knows? I think, though, that we've maybe uncovered some reason that this myth has somewhat persisted and why there's people that are big proponents of the fact that, colors matter. And I don't think it's colors. I think it's finish. I really do. Every guitar is going to be a little bit different. Here's the rub. We're saying this to you on the internet, and in a second, we're going to tell you to go to our website to shop our guitars and all of that stuff. And that is just simply the nature of our commerce and where it's going in the world. But the truth of the matter is, if you could sit down in a shop and pick up multiples of the same guitar, you're probably going to find one that's a little lighter than the next one, and that feels a little bit different than another one, and that sounds a little different, even if everything else is the same. And so, when it comes to online shopping, I'll just say this and leave it at that. I think the more consistent a builder is, the more all of that evens out, but there's always going to be differences. And that's, I think, a good thing about guitars.
It's part of the magic and the mysticism. And you gotta...
Oh, don't get me started on mysticism with guitar players.
Let's go! Yeah, everybody, like you're talking about, maybe Eric Johnson could hear the sassafras. Yeah. Who cares if that's true or not? Who's gonna put it to the test?
At the end of the day, he sounds like Eric Johnson.
He's a fantastic player, yeah. And so if, say, Billy Corgan can hear the difference, and he's got great tones, who cares?
Yep, absolutely.
Think what you want to think.
So does it matter? Maybe, and maybe we figured out why. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter what the color of your guitar is. It matters that you're making music on it, right? Because the best guitar in the world is...
the one that you're making music on now.
I was going to say the one with the thin finish.
That's
pretty color.
True, too, yeah.
So, anyways, we hope you enjoyed this video, and hopefully this answered some questions for all of you who searched for years on Harmony Central trying to find the answer to this question. That was a throwback, wasn't it?
Yeah, that was a good one.
Anyways, so if you're new to our channel, please make sure to subscribe, turn on notifications, like our videos, and we'd love to hear from you. Keep coming back. We'll keep making them for you. We'll see you next time.
Once again, you guys, thank you very much for watching. If you want to learn more about the guitar, check out Alamo Music. Oh, Pat.
Hey everybody, I love guitar videos just like you do. But guess what? Alamo Music Center has another YouTube channel. You can check out all the piano and keyboard reviews that we have and see more of me. Cooper, do we have another one of those? He's fine.